it's nice to see the energy in the room. I hope you're getting a lot from this. So this is our final session. After this, we have the reception, which I encourage you how to go. Lots of good experience in mind. So all of you here, let me just check. It's proposal. Okay, all ready to do your proposal. Now, I want to say one thing before I introduce our panelists. The proposal is a very different animal in different programs, even within the same school sometimes. So we don't, this is not a session on, like, the nitty-gritty of how to do a proposal. Although you may have technical questions you want to ask, like about crafting research questions, etc. We can get into that later. But the panelists are going to share with you is their individual journeys, what they did, how they did it, what are the problems they ran into, what really helped them. And really important, because they finished they finished, two of them have finished their dissertation, the alumni coming back. What they wish they might have done differently. They're paying that forward. So we have Andrew Dorantes, and I will let them say when they graduated from School of Educational Studies.
Yes.
And Shayda Kafai, who graduated from Cultural Studies. And Josian Lin, who is a student, one of your peers, but she's just proposal. So fresh off the ship, right? Just done her proposal. So she has like hot stuff to share. So Andrew and Shayda are going to just speak for a while, and then Josian will jump in when we do any kind of question and answer. Before they start, just so that you're primed to be receiving stuff and to join in the conversation after, think a little bit about what is it you came here wanting to find out. We want to jot something down, but think about it so that you are really ready to hear stuff. What did you come here to find out about the proposal writing? Okay, so I'm going to ask Andrew to launch into his story and tell us a little bit about when you graduated,
Sure.
and what your dissertation topic was.
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon. I don't believe I've met any of you. My name is Andrew Dorantes. I'm actually the Vice President for Administration and Finance at Harvey-Mudd College since 2003. I began my PhD journey in 2005 and I finished in 2014. It took 9 years to finish, 5 years for classes, 4 years to wander, and 4 months to do the dissertation. So I hope to leave you with several takeaways today. The most important one is that it does not have to take as long as it took me, and also that it is entirely possible. And if you have doubts, don't. Seriously, you'll know a little bit about my journey as I talk, but if I could do it, really anybody could do it. When I began my program in 2005, I had no intention to finish the program. Had I told my faculty advisors that, they probably wouldn't have let me in. I really just wanted to understand the nuances of faculty life and student life. I had the type of job that I wanted to retire from. So in preparation for today's panel, we were given a list of questions, and one of them is how did I find my topic, and importantly, my questions. So I don't know if you've taken, has anybody taken Dr. Pake's course? Dr. Susan Pake, she teaches a course on research, and I will say it was the only class I got an A minus in, but I did learn a ton. And one of the things, it's a fabulous course, who's in the SES program?
Yeah, so we have a very mixed audience. But by the way, I will say that in different schools, there are different classes like Dr. Pake's, where it's sort of like a course that gets you ready to really think about a research question and craft a proposal. Some places call it capstone, directed research, and so on. So there are courses, and you don't have to, if it doesn't, not offered in your school, even if you're in a different field, but you all pass that stage or pass it on to your fellow students. Take it in another school. You can do that.
If you have that opportunity, I haven't taken Dr. Pake's course, it's incredible. I mean, I probably shouldn't have waited as long, but when I did, it opened my eyes. I mean, what she does is she'll have you look at peer-reviewed journals and helps to dissect them into understanding what's the research life problem, the research literature problem, the hypothesis sometimes is not absolutely clear, and theoretical framework, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which is something that I struggled with. But anyway, what I like about Dr. Pake's course is that she actually requires you, forces you, to write a 15-page mini proposal in the class. And then after you submit it, you get to share that with all your classmates, and they get to critique it and tear it apart. And so I had done, my initial topic was going to be on the Sarbanes-Oxley legislation and how higher education institutions were responding to it. So one of the individuals in the class, Jim Andreezy, he pushed back, and he said that the topic was stale, and that I should do it on another topic, such as the financial crisis. And I wasn't too happy with him, because I had it all done, and I was going to submit it. But I listened, and I actually walked into the car, and we talked for about an hour, and I realized that he was right. And so I had to switch my topic, and the topic became, so once I understood that, the question became very, 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 very clear. So it's basically financial management, financial crisis management in higher education, how private colleges and universities responded to the Great Recession. So I figured that was not only a relevant topic for that time, it's relevant always, because institutions will always have a crisis. So one of the other questions briefly is that what is the hardest thing with coming up with a proposal? For me, the question wasn't hard, it was really more of the theoretical framework. And Dr. Pake helped me learn that. And I didn't get it the first time. When I submitted the paper, I quoted the work of Dr. Chait, who had done a study in the 1980s, and I thought that was a theoretical framework. It was just a study. And so both Dr. Pake and also Dr. Smith, who became my faculty advisor, who reviewed it, said that's not a theoretical framework. So then I started thinking through other courses. Has anyone taken a course with Dr. Daryl Smith?
Yes.
Daryl's amazing.
She's amazing.
Retired,
She's
but
gone.
absolutely amazing. Took several classes with her, and one was a governance class. And there are different models for making decisions, such as the rational decision-making process, the political process, and the organized anarchy, and so forth. So I was going to use that as a model. And she pushed back and said, she asked what I call the so what question is, how does that address the research literature problem? You know, there's been a lot written about that. It should be something maybe different. Well, in that mini proposal that I had submitted to her, I had quoted, I cited the research of Dr. Ellen Chafee, who studied 14 institutions in 1984, and basically was wanting to study their response to a crisis. She bifurcated the sample between more resilient institutions and less resilient, and she developed a model of strategies, which is the interpretive model and the adaptive model. In very simple terms, the adaptive model is the what of responding. If you have a crisis, you respond by decreasing expenses or increasing revenue. The interpretive strategies is more of the how you do something, the management of meaning and symbolism and so forth. So her findings, Dr. Chafee's findings, actually became my hypothesis. And so that's basically the issue of the proposal. So I'll mention one other item, I think it'll help. So in terms of challenges, so although I finished my my coursework in 5 years, I had made very little progress on my dissertation. Like many minorities and women, I had suffered from what's known as the imposter syndrome. I don't know if you've heard about this phenomenon, which is a phenomenon where individuals who've achieved success and external evidence of their competence still doubt their successes. So although I had a 25-year career in finance, obtaining a PhD seemed beyond my reach. So I told Dr. Smith that I could not see myself as an academic. And she says, I will see it for you until you can. And when she said that, I'm like, wow, I respect her. She thinks I can finish. I guess I can finish. And so, but one last item. I now, at that point, knew I could do it. The question was motivation. And I still had no motivation. I had no reason to finish until I met Dr. Tony Jimenez, who's the assistant director for the Chicano Latino Student Association at the Claremont Consortium. And he cited a piece of research that changed everything. He said, Andrew, do you know that less than 1% of Latinos that begin elementary school in this country obtain a PhD? The moment those words left his mouth, I said, that's it. I'm not going to do it for me to get a better job or to encourage my kids. I have to do it to use my experience to motivate others. No joke. From the moment he said that to the proposal, defense was 30 days. And from the proposal to the dissertation was 3 months, a total of 4 months. So I will end with this piece in terms of strategies, because Dr. Smith she's done this for decades, and so she has helped many people with many strategies. So one common strategy you probably have heard to work on the proposal or the dissertation is work on X pages a day. Well, I'm not that kind of person. I'm an all or nothing. And so she said, well, for you, why don't we try this? Why don't you go to a hotel and take time off and take a whole week off? And so I said, I will do that. So I got permission from my wife that I can ignore her and the kids for 4 months. And I took 3 weeks off, 1 week at a time. The first time was to write the proposal. I would check into a hotel near the ocean. I love the sound of the waves. I checked in the hotel, went to the grocery stores, bought groceries, and never emerged, never left that place until 7 days later when I had finished my proposal. All I did was go to sleep, wake up, and do this, and it is possible. Now, there was an ACE fellow at the moment, and at the time she was an ACE fellow for both. Her name is Patricia Price. I don't know if you met her, and she was here last year working with CGU and Harvey Mudd, and this is her field. She teaches research methods, and I told her I was going to do, and she says, binge reading and writing doesn't work. So when I finished my proposal, I sent her an email before I rewarded myself with a 45-mile bike ride near the ocean. I love bike riding. And I emailed her, and she says, I guess it works for you. So there are different ways. So that's just a bit. I can show a little bit more, but I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I'm just taking notes of the board. I didn't want to interrupt him to say that's what I was doing, but that's why I'm thinking behind you. And we'll look at it later, right? I'm just trying to consolidate everything we're hearing, and maybe we'll bring your questions connected to those notes. Let's hear from Shayda, her story. Shayda's from cultural studies, so now it's a whole different field, and we have a mixed audience in the room. Don't worry if your field is not going to be spoken about, because this is not a place where we say these are the 5 things you're going to do for your proposal. This is really about strategy. Shayda.
Hi. I would have loved to have like a week at the beach to write.
My boss was very understanding.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, never hurts to ask.
Yes. So I started the PhD program in the fall of 2008, and I defended in July of 2014. So I'm a new graduate, and I was teaching 2 courses at Cal Poly when I was doing my proposal. So it was a battle that was, I had to juggle a lot. But as far as the first question of how did you find your topic or your question, as I was reflecting back on coursework and I was looking at the different things I had to read for quals, I kept thinking of the question, what do I have a personal stake in? And what am I committed to on a personal level? And another question I asked was, what am I interested in that my education did not create space for or speak about? And for me, in my department at least, those were issues around disability and queerness. So as I was trying to craft a question, that's what I was really looking for, because I knew I was going to spend years sitting with a dissertation and a topic, and I wanted something that I would have a personal stake in. With the process of the proposal, I got a journal that was just for the proposal, and as I would go through and read texts, this would be the place where I would write down notes or questions that would come up. I had a piece of butcher paper that I actually took from the writing center where I was working, and I just put it by my wall, and as I read, I would write questions on that, because sometimes to actually see the points come up was a lot easier, and the connections were made quickly that way. So things that either folks in the text were not talking about, things that really stood out to me, I would put on this piece of butcher paper, and I would craft my question that way, based on what were the gaps, what were the things that folks just weren't talking about that needed to be spoken about. As far as challenges, I mean, the research was hard to find because of what I was looking at, but the one question that I wanted to kind of go to that we were asked to think about is, beyond faculty, what were the resources that helped us cultivate our questions, write our proposals, and I know for me what was absolutely integral was my writing community. So I had 3 folks from the department. We were all at different stages, and that didn't matter, right? once a week on the weekends when neither of us were working, we would get together, we would all bring snacks, and we would sit together in a room for 5 to 6 hours. And we would start the session not like in an amorphous way, like, great, you're all here, let's get started. We started by setting goals. So we would take a break every hour to 2 hours. And before we would get into the session, we would set the goal of what do we want to achieve in this next hour or 2 hours. After that, we would stop, we would check in with one another. If somebody needed support, and often we did, we would give that person support, answer questions, set the goal for the next hour or 2 hours. And this like weekly meeting with this particular group of folks kept me accountable to not just myself, because in this really open space of no longer being in classes and no longer having this regulatory pattern of walls, I needed something more than being accountable to myself. And if I had a community, then I could be accountable to them and with them. The other thing that really, really worked was as a part of this writing community. So this idea of the imposter syndrome has come up a lot. And an essay I would recommend folks reading is called The Watcher at the Gates. And it's really short. It's by Gail Goodwin. And it's this piece that talks about the critic that kind of sits at your desk and follows you wherever you work and, just spits negativity at you. You can't do this, the sentence is horrible, you might as well give up now, right? And the sentence kind of, the essay asks you to stop and explore what your watcher at the gate tells you. Mine was very nasty. And I recommend you all read it, because I think once you identify what are the different things, the different forms of negative self-talk that you get that stop you from writing, right, that make you physically leave your desk, close your laptop, and go clean the kitty litter or do the dishes, which is what I did, right, this like immediate satisfaction of doing something, then you can tackle it and you know how to speak back to it. So often what we would do in the group is, and I know I kept it up very regularly, was if I was writing and something negative popped in my head, you can't do this, you're not supposed to be here, they're going to find you out, I would literally write it on a piece of paper, and it was out of me, and I would go back to my research or my typing. So that was extremely helpful to say, instead of having to toss around in my head and ruminate over it, I'm going to write you down, just put you over here. Right? And that was really, really helpful to keep the momentum and keep writing. And the proposal for me, because the research was hard to find, it took me a full semester to do a proposal. And then the other beyond like faculty resource, and this is going to sound really funny, but I don't mean this as a joke, I mean this in like all seriousness, was my therapist, right? And I will talk more about how I think tangible self-care is extremely important for this process. Having mental health care through this process is very important. And the one thing that I wish I knew that I didn't through this whole process was that it's important to celebrate messiness, and I can talk more about that if you all want, but celebrate messiness, 1, and 2, honor the work that you do and be compassionate with yourselves. I didn't know that. I was existing in a place of just my brain, and I forgot I had a body, and I forgot I had emotions, right? So if there's 2 things I wish I knew, it was that messiness is incredible, and we shouldn't run from it. My tendency is always to like put a bow on it, right, make it look really perfect and set it over here. That messiness is important, and compassion with yourselves as you're writing the proposal, and then to carry that with you as you do your dissertation is just absolutely vitally important.
Okay. Just going to let it sit for a while. 2 incredible stories. Think about it for a bit. We may have questions emerging now, so I'm going to, in a while, open it up to questions. And Josian will jump in as part of that questioning, unless you want to talk a little. You have some story about your. You just did it. What was it like?
Yeah, because I was thinking, okay,
All right, well, here's
I
what
apologize for my totally not structured talk
We
because.
just said celebrate the messiness.
Yeah. I just
Take
kind
that.
of, my schedule kind of opened up, so I was like, oh, I'll volunteer for this. I work for the Writing Center, and our director is on the panel for how to write dissertation now. So I defended my proposal in actually 2014, so it's a year back, right? So, and I'm writing in the middle of writing my dissertation. So I guess I would like to share, I
What
didn't.
field did you share? What
Oh,
field?
I'm in culture study in English, so I didn't really have the questions, so I
Right, she was
prepared.
the last minute, come and talk to us.
Yeah, so I actually prepared different talks. It's more like really how to write a proposal, right? As a writing consultant, this is what I was. And we also have a lot of people coming to writing center and having this fear about, oh, I'm going to write a proposal. How am I going to, what is a proposal, right? So that's kind of what I would want to cover. Since I assume everyone sitting here is probably not done the proposal, or you would be in the panel with my boss, like how to finish them. So I can't say, oh, it's doable, but of course it's doable because I did it. But a lot of people had this fear about having the proposal done is because they don't think it's good enough. But I want to say, remember, it's just a work in progress. Because it's a proposal, you propose it, you defend it, you advance to candidacy. You great, I'm a candidate. So, but remember, you haven't really done all the research necessary required for the dissertation. That's why it's a proposal. So, when I first submitted, how did I find my topic? Because for culture study English, we read a lot for qualifying exam, and I actually didn't have any solid project before I did my exam. And then after I did all the reading, I actually kind of have an idea. So I actually wrote my proposal kind of differently from them. I've been writing my proposal as I'm preparing for my qual. And then for English and culture study, we have the luxury, or humanities. I know some professors that you design your questions, so I kind of phrase my question as my research question, so I want to kind of use my question as well. Why not, right? Because they will tell you whether this works or this not. So when I'm kind of devising and I guess everybody did the clause, but if you kind of word in that stage, you could, because I think for some discipline, clause and proposal are the same stage. So you could actually do it that way. And when I first submitted my proposal, it's like, wow, 30-some pages, and my professor said, cut it down in half. I was like, what? Because I thought it has to be longer. And then he said, no, because a lot of things you have to say in your dissertation, not in your proposal. So I think that actually would probably release some of your stress. The proposal is just a proposal that you tell your professor whether or not it's going to work. So there are a few things, because I will ask the student, like, what should be included in the proposal? Do you have a sample proposal? And I think these are the questions you have to ask. You have to propose to your committee, because they're the ones say, pass, not pass, right? Not me, because I could give you what I think is great, but it probably didn't work for your discipline. Yeah, so always ask, and then they will say, I want this page number, whatever. And then, but there are few elements that you have to include in your proposal, and I think it's nice to think about it, right? Why is it important? Like, what are you contributing to the field? It's the same thing for all the paper you've written, but it's really different. Is you have to justify why you're doing this. It has to have certain contribution, right? So why is it important? And then you have to think about, is it doable? So of course you're proposing a thing you haven't done, so you don't know whether it's doable, but at least you have to make it sound like it's doable to your professor. So your methodology. And then also there will be a chapter outline that includes what would be in there. And then also the significance and limitation, because you have to defend why certain things are not in your project. So those are the things to take into consideration, yeah. So I'll be in the Q&A, so if you have any question about more like the format and everything, I could address that. But I just think it's important to think that it's a work in progress, because a lot of people change the proposal into their introduction so at least that's what commonly done in the humanities. So remember, that's the thing you will for sure rewrite or revise. So it doesn't have to be perfect, because I know a lot of people are in fear of submitting their proposal because they don't think it's good enough. But I think, yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect.
That's a very important thing. Actually, look at the four of us here, three of us work in the writing center. I worked in the writing center, so Shayda and I worked together at the same time, and then
And currently working
now she works in the writing center. So, and I know one of the things that I share with you is that the number of people you see who come in, and they're this, it seems like a huge thing, this proposal. Right? Just the name, give a proposal to do a dissertation, it's massive. So it has that sense of awesomeness. But she's right, it is just a proposal. Things often change. Sometimes you start your research and it shifts because you're finding something else. What they want to see in the proposal is evidence of your ability to do independent research. Right. And so if the direction shifts a little bit often, it's not the end of the world. In fact, it's natural.
Yeah, and if I could share so what I proposed and what was accepted, although I was looking at performance art and disability performance art, the topic shifted radically when my dissertation started. So I guess what I think is really important too is that remember that the proposal is malleable. So whatever information you put in your proposal and whatever it is that you defend, even if it changes slightly or drastically when you're writing your dissertation, don't throw that away. So I ended up turning the proposal that I had into a book chapter. So the point is don't throw anything away because you might end up using it for something else, but allow that space of the proposal to be malleable. And yeah, they just want to see that you can do this work.
Yeah. It's proving, it's like proof of concept, like, yeah, I am the scholar now, just prove it to you, and then you'll okay me, and then I'll do the dissertation. Now, it's a little different sometimes in some fields. In education or in social sciences, your proposal has 3 chapters almost of your dissertation, right? And it gives you the sense that, I'll share a little bit of what happened to me. So I wrote the first 3 chapters, proposal, and it was really tight and everything. But I knew going in, I was doing an exploratory study, and while it wasn't pure grounded research, it was going to be a qualitative piece exploring to build theory. I was like, well, should I really do the lit review yet? I mean, yes, of course you do some lit review, but how tight did it have to be? Well, I did it because that was the format in my school. And sure enough, collected the data, had to redo the whole literature review because things were emerging to build my theory from the ground, from the data, that pointed me toward other things, neuroscience, various things. So I had to completely, my chapter 2, which is a lit review, shifted radically. My question didn't change very much, but it's a research, that's why I like to celebrate the messiness. Sometimes research is really tidy. You have a question, you have a method, you have the data, and it's bang, it's great. But it's also possible that it's going to be this slightly messy process. You keep discovering things. The nature of discovery is it's not a known zone. So if you're in the unknown and you're probing, sometimes your probes, you try this direction and it doesn't quite work, but you get a lot of data, a lot of information about why, and that's learning. That's how all scientific work progresses, but walking into the unknown and probing. So getting used to the messiness is a good thing, whichever fields you come from. But just to do a poll, can we just say what fields are here? We have education, DBOS, psych, religion, others? Cultural studies, economics, political science, public health, all very different. So part of this is also sharing strategies that are different in different fields, just so you have a sense how different it is. But you might pick up strategies from a different field and say, wow, I wonder if that approach might work for me. So we've heard from our speakers. What specific questions do you have?
Yeah. Actually, this is pretty much a cultural studies specific question, but in terms of I came from an MA in International Studies, which was very structured, and for example, introduction and lit review. But from what I've heard in research that I've done, that's not necessarily the case for cultural studies. And one of the issues that I'm having in thinking about my ideas is how much do you balance each section if you only have 15 to 20 pages to write? What does the lit review begin to look like, if any at all?
I know for that specifically, the way that I was told to split it up was to have, and it was 15 pages also. So the intro where I kind of start to say the so what and why should we start looking at this topic was about 2 pages. My lit review was about 3 to 4 pages. The bulk of it, they wanted to know what the chapters were going to look like. So the method was close reading, and that was very brief. They really wanted to know what the chapters are going to look like and how are the main concepts going to start, how are the theories that I'm playing with and asserting going to start unpacking themselves. So I know for cultural studies, at least that's what I was asked for. I don't know your experience with Switzerland.
I think our lit review is slightly broader because I'm new to that investigation.
You see those differences, but you know, as you, all 3 of you were talking, I was taking down some sort of like, something general to all proposals, you know, the fields are so different, right? So what does it look like? And I know Andrew actually has a copy, he might be able to put it up and show us, but you are all playing around these things, you know, a good researcher, so whatever you do in research, this is what we all have in common with each other. There is a question you're asking. So if, wherever you are in the proposal, right, take a look, you have that piece. These are like the jigsaw puzzle pieces. There are, call it various things, theories, frameworks, models, and epistemology. I'm looking at it from, positivist lens, different kind of lens. What is the lens through which you are looking at this problem, the world, to do your research? So whether you're doing early modern English lit, right? You're doing history, you're doing psychology. Is there this piece? Often people struggle with this. Right? This is the hard one, and this is the piece where you want to make appointments and go and talk to people. But always go, if you're talking to faculty, or with like you had a conversation with colleagues who persuaded you otherwise, right? So this piece really connects to sharing and getting feedback. Be bold. Say, what are some of the theories I use normally to think, now that I've been through coursework? And now when I do my readings, I'm always thinking through this lens, right? Why? And then go do some research on it, but talk to faculty about it. Because they can also tell you, you know what, that's too small a theory, it's not going to help you. Because they may have much more research on it. So that's a really important piece. This is a kind of argumentative thinking you all do no matter what your proposal is going to be. In the Writing Center, we use this thing called the CARS model, creating a research space. And it has a number of moves. Move number 1 is, what's the territory? So it's like standing on top of a hill and looking and surveying the land and saying, oh, well, that piece between this river and this river, so we've got a picture, what's the scope? Within that territory, there is a patch of land that is uncultivated. That's your gap. You really need to know this. And so most of us struggle with that because there's so much literature to survey. And then you're going to put them in conversation with each other and say, well, they're talking about this and this, but they've never looked at it from the perspective of adolescents, right? Or they're talking about this particular historical analysis, but they haven't ever looked at the perspective of women in that experience. So what is the gap? And that kind of gets easier if you have a meaningful personal interest in talking about it. So what's your passion? And don't be afraid of that. The more meaningful it is, hopefully this is work you will do for a few decades. If you want to make it something you care about. And then why is it important? It's a so what. The best person to do that is a very cynical friend. In my case, it was my husband. He's very good at just poking away at it. But why? But why? Why is it important? What's the big deal about this that you want to do? I was looking at imagination, so we have a lot of room to go poking at me. But it really strengthens your thought and your argument. So knowing what's the gap, why it is important, and you brought up a very important thing, really, how realistic is it? It has to be So it's almost like a keynote. Your dissertation should be the keynote for the rest of it. So it's just a note of the whole opera. So I think that is a general thing that applies. I mean, I'd like to hear if anyone has other things from your field that you're curious about in relation to this. Questions, comments?
I feel like economics is a little different because we have the option, it's ever more frequent instead of like doing like the standard book to do just like articles pretty much. So we just have to do 3 articles.
3 arguments are very, have you heard of the Stella dissertation? Kent? So you can pressure your departments. 3 publishable articles on different aspects of something, and then you might in some places write the bookends, an intro and a conclusion and pulls it together.
Those articles have to be published in the peer review journal?
No, the publishable.
Yeah, like policy equivalent.
And what's great about it is then when you leave, you know, the dissertation as a genre of writing is called an occluded genre, because you only write it once. Right? It's not a genre that is written a lot, only once. And so some fields and some schools, Harvard Education School actually does a 3-article dissertation, because you leave with what? You've done the dissertation, but you have papers. And here's something, writing a publishable length paper is a whole style, genre, and discipline of this many pages. Squeezing your whole research into this many pages, that you're so busy writing the dissertation you might not get to it. And most of us, when we write a big dissertation, are fighting with ourselves and time, like we talked earlier, to write a publishable article so we get practicing. Right? So I envy these people. I wish I could have done that, because I had to write articles on the side. So, nice bit of news to know, yes.
I have a separate question about, at what point in the process were you guys declaring your committees? And sort of the politics of asking someone or not, or how to.
I should shut it down. Yeah, a very important question.
I mean, mine was, it was fairly straightforward, since there weren't too many folks that were doing the kind of work that I was interested in. After my quals, in the same room before we all got up and left, I just asked them if they would carry over and be part of my dissertation committee, and they said yes. So for me, that was a very, I guess, clean way. It was just, it worked out really, really well. But I know other folks have had a more difficult time kind of selecting, so I don't know if you all had that experience.
Was it before your proposal or
Yeah.
after your proposal, those people, or?
Before my proposal. Correct.
Yeah. So do you like get a proposal and then bring it to the committee, or do you like discuss like the topics with the committee? Like what's
Before
the-
writing it, you mean?
Yeah.
I met with them often, and I told them I had this general idea of I wanted to look at how can we challenge the stereotypes of disability through performance art making, right? So I had the general idea, and then I met with each of them individually to get their feedback. And then we would just meet on an individual basis before I wrote everything and met with everybody collectively to defend. Yeah. But I would definitely, I recommend everybody does that, is to talk to each committee member about the proposal and the direction of the proposal before you actually defend, and as you're kind of creating your archive of research.
So my process, again, recommend Dr. Paik, because she forced us to do this mini proposal, and I literally I basically took that proposal and I emailed it to Dr. Smith and to Dr. Thomas and to Linda Perkins. I had courses with all of them except Dr. Thomas, but Dr. Thomas' field is economics, and it just seemed to fit. What I didn't mention is I had to study 4 bodies of literature: economics of higher education, strategic response, crisis response, governance. That's why Dr. Smith was chosen, because of her knowledge of governance and so forth. So I probably did everything A to book O. I actually defended the quals and the proposal the same day. You're not, I mean, I tell you, I told you, 5 years courses, 4 years of wandering across the street. I just worked across the street. I wasn't motivated. But then when Dr. Smith, I forgot to mention, she had retired, and she actually stayed on for me and for one other person to finish. And she also said that she was leaving the country. I thought she was leaving forever, but she was only a week or so. But I needed to get it done. And so I emailed them. I mean, so good that Dr. Pate required us to do this, because I said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And now I didn't have it, that was hard. Theoretical framework, especially from my finance accounting background, it was difficult. And I got it wrong in the proposal, the mini proposal I sent to Dr. Smith, to Dr. Pate, and then it evolved.
I know it varies by department, but I was just curious if you had the option, and I know you, because you mentioned this just now, you defended 12 and the proposal at the same time. Would you do that again? You know, question for you, or if you had the option, would you have done that? I don't know, I'm just kind of a verbose writer. I write a lot, and so, you know, I guess part of it for me is kind of like an exercise. I don't know. I'm not sure what I plan to do yet, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So, you know, my question is going to depend on your personality, I think, or even if they allow you to do this. When I started, they required 4 proposals, and then it went to 3, 4 quals, and then it went to 3, and then I actually did 2, and I came back from the ocean, and I talked to Cece Gaddy, and she says, what's next? I'm going to work on the 3rd qual, the economics. She says, why do you have to do that? The rules changed and so forth. It turns out I didn't have to do a 3rd qual, so I ended up, and well, I was going to be on the, I still had to do it because it was the economics. My 3rd qual would have been the economics by head, which was in the second, in my lit review. It had to be, I didn't have to go through that process. For me, it's very, my journey is very atypical. I think for most people, you really should do it throughout the process, like you said. I mean, that is the smartest way to do it. And I did it in a very dangerous way, in such a way that you could almost be disconnected from people. But because I'm across the street, Daryl will periodically say, let's have lunch, and she wouldn't let me get too far, and I wasn't too far. So, but for me, I'm an all or nothing kind of person, so this worked for me. But I'm not sure it works for everybody. It probably doesn't.
That's why we invited Andrew here, because that atypical story might give you ideas that, you know, go in, these ideas to go and explore. We go back to know yourself, will it work for me, and then talk to faculty. The one thing we have with the false proposal dissertation is a lot of flexibility. Actually, that's where we get into trouble, because there is so much flexibility, and sometimes you then feel very lost. You can make that flexibility work for you if you have a specific question. Can I do it like this? And say no. At least you know. You start finding where the boundaries are. There was a question there.
Yeah, so do you recommend going fishing for, like if you can't figure out how your committee should be put together, to go send the proposal out and say, hey, is this interesting to you? You know, or is it better to pick your committee first and then go for the proposal?
I was going to say that, German, to everyone's question is, I think it depends on your chair. You know, your committee, it's all about politics, right?
Yes.
Some chair, they like to be the one that decided who are also on the committee. So they like to be the one that approve first and send it out to the, yeah. And then like your question, I think it would be like, I would like them to be separately, because I don't know whether I will keep the same committee for my clause versus the one for my proposal.
What if it didn't
Because
work?
the proposal might be the one for my dissertation. And my dissertation, I'm still keeping my 4th reader open. Right now, I'm still waiting for one, but there's no rush, right? Because you wouldn't be able to see my thing till I'm done with that. So I think that would depend on your chair. But some people that would have a proposal and then go fishing for possible readers, because even though they might not be the core committee, they could also be the reader, which would be a good reference for you in the future when you look for jobs.
And can I say something about the reader, that external reader? Not every program has this, right? In some programs, it's mandatory. You have your committee and then an external reader who's not on faculty, etc. Even if it's not the culture of your department, it's a good idea to try to explore to get, because, like you said, it's a good connection to someone outside. It can be a very useful voice and very different lens on your work, very valuable. It's really
Okay.
good to have.
So to follow up on that, I'm having trouble finding somebody in my subspecialty on campus.
What's your subspecialty?
So I'm looking at like national security, nuclear deterrence, international security type issues.
And you're in which field?
Political
Oh,
science.
Political science, that's right.
So Claremont's very heavy on IPE, of course, Yasik's pretty good on the security stuff, but not so much on the technology side. And I've looked at Harvey Mudd and some other people with a little bit of nuclear diplomacy experience, that kind of stuff. I've just come up empty. So I'm wondering how far off campus I can go searching for somebody.
Across country.
Mhm.
Yeah, I did it, there was nobody on campus who would do my specific subspecialty, so I went to someone at the University of Michigan. So that was my fourth reader, was someone who does specifically what I was focusing on,
Okay.
and they would Skype into the conversations, and that worked out very well.
Yeah, going along with that, how did you approach the person? Did you already know them? Did you already have a connection to the person in, you said Michigan? Or was it just someone you know, you'd read their work, and you knew they were kind of did research in this area, and you contacted them?
Yeah, it was the latter. It was someone who I read her books, and I really loved everything that she was talking about, and it was connecting to the things I was interested in, and I just reached out to her, and it happened that she was open to doing it.
You might get some no's, but you can always ask.
Is there a sort of database that we can go to see past proposals?
Yes. There, the Huddle Library, you go in there and you can see, they're all public, oh, sorry, proposals.
Proposals,
Not
yeah.
dissertations, never mind, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
Proposals, yes,
There's so
your
many variations across
departments,
the department.
your departments have copies, right, because you submit an official proposal. They don't let you walk away with them, but many departments, this is why it's really good to get to know the secretary. But I think even officially, if you say, can I see some samples and just want to view them, in most departments you might be able to browse, right? But we have, it's going to be a good segue, one we can look at. Yeah. Andrew can show his. And while we're bringing it up, this political question, you have to be, a lot of talking happens before you figure it out. Okay. So
Can I make one comment on the chair? And I understand the question in terms of you're looking for somebody who is very familiar in your area. To me, Dr. Smith wasn't familiar with the economics, and it was heavy on that, although it was a qualitative study. But I'm positive that it wasn't, if she was in my chair, I would not have been. And it was that connection that she saw me through. And I like Dr. Thomas. I got to know him more. In fact, one of the things is I was shocked, but after I defended my dissertation, he said, I'm going to do something I've never done before, and he says, I'm offering you a job to teach higher ed finance and economics. So I taught last summer a class in economics and higher ed. I was very afraid that this is his field and so forth, but I really think personality-wise, I don't know if I would have finished. And so it's very important to know that if that connection works, because I know of several people who are still working on it, and they're not getting the response from the person, and Daryl is amazing.
So this is a balance between the expert on your committee and the champion.
Yes.
You want someone to champion.
Yeah, and I think, at least for the chair, because that's the person you're going to have the most connection with and conversation with on a daily basis, they have to be your advocate, right? And I like that you said that, because my chair was my advocate.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is very important.
Yeah,
So-
they have to go to bat for you. They have to support you, fight for you, fight your battles. And when we talk about self-management earlier, talking to your faculty or chair, that's the person you can have those hard conversations with. They'll tell the truth and keep you going.
So in terms of the proposals, we had mentioned, several comments were mentioned about don't think of it's big. I mean, when you look at this, I think it's 10 to 15 slides. Daryl said, we will stop you at 15 minutes, so I time myself and so forth. But I actually came up with a approach. This slide shows about 45 slides. So I have an appendix, and I anticipated that they would ask questions, and every question they had asked, I had anticipated, and I put up my slide. So I probably used 80% of what was there. But I kept to my 15 minutes and so forth, so I'm not going to go over the detail, but you'll get a feeling for what it looks like. It's the page down. Okay. Yes, so go here. Statement of the problem, introduction, theoretical rationale, purpose of the study, significance of the study, and the research question.
Can I say something? Even if this is not the format of the proposal you write because your field is very different, that logic, that thought process is very useful. So I know people in English lit who use that, even though English lit would never present it like this.
So you
Think through it this way.
So there was the Great Depression, there was crisis, that was the problem, theoretical rationale, as described earlier, the purpose of the study, the significance of the study, and the research question. Method, I used the qualitative study as not a case study approach, and I interviewed 20 CFOs from 20 institutions, mostly on the West Coast with some on the East Coast. I talked about my sample, the selection of interview participants, and the study period. Then I went through a process that I followed. I determined I needed to bifurcate the sample between more resilient and less resilient. I used a measure to do that. I described the categories. I got the data, described it. I would be doing interviews, and then I would analyze the interviews after taping it. Oh my goodness, if I hadn't taped it, I had to go through that recorder so many times. And I will say that at the end, it was 150 pages. I think the first time I did it, my first draft was I really only had 2 drafts. I submitted it to Daryl. She looked at a few comments, and the biggest complaint she said is, Andrew, this is a qualitative study. You've missed the story. And I had it in my notes, but I felt like I would be giving their identity away, and I felt very uncomfortable. But once I figured out a way to do that, that was the easiest 25 pages to write because the stories were there and their quotes and so forth. So I did that. Bifurcation of the sample, we're not going to go into the detail of that. Then I described kind of the data that I would be looking at. I looked at data from iPads, audited financial statements that are available on the web. I have a background, I'm a CPA, so it was really easy for me. I knew what I was looking for. The interviews, I talked about the pre-interview, the interview design, the questions, and these were seriously, my interviews were probably an hour. Most of them, 18 of them were an hour and a half, 90 minutes. One was 2 hours, and one was an hour. But these 5 questions basically launched everything. That resulted in an hour and a half conversation, and could have gone even longer because of how broad the questions were. Post-interview data analysis, I talked about what I did after. I'm not going to go through that in detail. Post-interview, then I talked about the strategies, the adaptive and the interpretive. And these are some of the information that I got from iPad and so forth. And then I compared the less and more institutions. And going through this timeline. They wanted to have a timeline. So Dr. Thomas, when I was submitting the proposal, he says, Andrew, this is incredibly aggressive. You know, he says, I'm not sure you're going to be able to do this. I said, watch me. And he also, because he's so used to in his background, he was trying to make, he wanted more of a quantitative study. And Daryl and I, we stuck to our guns because he wanted me to, when I explained it, he wanted it a little more quantitative, and in the end we continued with our approach, and he was very happy with what he saw in the end. So we did the timeline, and then this is a list of the appendix. I had my lit review, they asked questions about that. I talked about how, there were several questions about the CFI, which is the measure I use to determine financial resilience. No, I don't want to mention it. The data, I forgot I have the names, they could see the names. The data, and operating surpluses and so forth, and a variety of the different items, endowment pursuit, selectivity. These are the kind of the factors that I used when I was analyzing the data and so forth. And I went through that pretty quickly, but if you have questions, you can ask me later.
I think one of the things that I said they're looking to see evidence of the ability to do research, that kind of thing. And yes, we can. So what you want to do now is ask yourself, I think you asked a very good question, right? What does it look like in my discipline? Either your department will have it, or they can tell you who's recently done one. Then you can email that student and say, do you mind letting me have a look? I can meet with you and look it over something, but we'll find out, because look how might be, if you're in this field, you have a great idea what this looks like. What does it look like in English, history, political science, econ, cultural studies? So one of the things you really need to do after eating today is find out what this animal looks like. So much easier.
10 slides. That's all it is.
I think that also the really important thing too of seeing what does it look like when you're department is it demystifies the whole process. Because I know for me, it seemed like this unwieldy, huge thing. I didn't know what it looked like, what it had, and it felt like it was very unmanageable. But as soon as I saw somebody's, it demystified the whole process and it became something manageable. So aside from just seeing the format of it, just demystify the process for yourself. That was very empowering.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important.
If any of you are interested, let me know and I can email you a sanitized version.
And you know, in some.
That one page.
Right, yeah, that would be nice if this is similar to what you're thinking of. And the other thing is, in some departments, you don't even do a slide presentation. You submit something and they just sign off on it. You know? So you really need to find out instead of worrying about it, like, oh, what do my proposal? How many of you have had the conversation, I'm curious, with your faculty? Because do you know what it looks like? Sort of. Yeah, if they don't answer your questions, you know, so going with specific questions, like how many pages is it? What are the sections in this that I should have? And if you have some idea now from this session of the kinds of things generally, or do I need it to write the framework? And then someone will say, oh, no, you don't. And you don't. Because they decide, it's so different. Do I need to do a literature review and how much of it? And I'm thinking of these fields, is that all right? So go into planning that conversation and have a list of questions, like a checklist, and make them answer those questions. They'll be really happy to do that because it frees them from figuring out what to tell you. Because they're in a position of being so familiar with it, they don't even see the landscape anymore. They're like, well, you know, write a literature review. That looks as clear as day. To you, it's as clear as mud. It's not clear. So ask questions, yeah.
I guess for most of you, like you have people in your committee from different fields or like different backgrounds. I guess you would have like some more quant or econ, and someone like who might not be as familiar with the topic or not. So if you're doing like I guess a transdisciplinary research or kind of like approach, how would you like how clear do you have to make it for like the common denominator for all your committee members, or it's like they're PhDs and know each other or somewhat the topic, how like generalizable or I guess discipline specific to like the proposal be or not?
I was doing a transdisciplinary project, and for the proposal, at least for my committee, when I asked that question, and I recommend you do, they said to make it general, and then the dissertation and the chapters, that's when the specific information comes in. So it was supposed to be a general conversation, and they all knew about how to talk about the body and theorize the body, and that was it. That was my basic framework. The specificity came into the chapters.
So as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Smith, their field in diversity and governance and so forth, and not economics, and Dr. Dahman is economics. Dr. Perkins was neither of them. This was probably very different for her. But as you see in the PowerPoint, I think it does demystify it. It doesn't look that hard, right? I would say there's an inverse relationship between the simplicity of a document and how much time it took to get there, right? And so there is a lot, but she found it very interesting, but it was not her field at all.
I have a question in terms of, I know some people's committees do have a chair and a co-chair. I have a form in the committee. Does it matter specifically who, I know that the chair has to be willing to go back to you. But in terms of, for example, two of my members are more professional in a particular niche specificity that I'm into. Does it matter if they are the chairs or co-chairs or not in terms of them later applying for jobs? Does somebody even worry about that question? Or is it just a matter of pick the two people that are most available and I feel are most relatable, even if they're not the ones who are most specific to the field, that particular topic?
I know for my experience, my chair wasn't specifically familiar with the area I was exploring. And having now, I now have a teaching job, she was the one that wrote the recommendation, and it didn't matter that she was not the person who had like that specific area. I mean, I think it depends also what kind of a job you're applying for, but for me it was a teaching position, so yeah.
And I think that's a very good point. If you're going to a research institute, like an R1 or a think tank, That's why if you feel your committee are not complete experts in your area and your chair isn't, outside leader is valuable, and you get a recommendation. But in general, the recommendations are to your ability to be a researcher. That you do it. And any of them is good to that, it's traveled with you down the journey. I actually have to tell you that we're over time. But you know, please go to the reception. You may have more questions, and what we wanted to say in these breakout sessions is email us. Sometimes you're gonna go back and go, I wanted to ask about that, right? We're going to keep that orientation webpage open, because it's gonna be, this is a permanent program. We're repeating it every year, and these questions are all gonna go there, so it becomes a resource. So let us know, you can email me, shamini.dias@cgu.edu, anything to do with proposal, and we will find out and try to get back to you. All right, thank you, panelists.